Good afternoon. It's time to begin our regular Halacha Shir. I want to talk about eggs, and as usual, the discussion of one halachic topic inevitably brings in all kinds of other principles. And since we're going to be talking about eggs, in order to understand the halachas of eggs, we're going to have to be talking about the obligation of examination. When and under what circumstances are you obligated to examine something, or you can just assume that it's kosher, that it's okay. Before I begin with eggs, let me ask you if you have any questions of a halachic nature that we should discuss.
I've got one.
Okay.
So, water.
Water. Yeah, I remember I was once participating in a Shabbaton in Chutz La'aretz, and there was an error in the scheduling problem. There was a scheduling problem, and there was 1 hour that was missing. So the guy who was running, the rabbi who was running the Shabbaton, and I was like the guest rabbi, said, "Oh, let's fill in that blank hour with Ask the Rabbi." And I said to him, "What happens if they ask a difficult question that we don't know the answer to?" And he said, "Don't worry, they don't know any difficult questions. We'll be able to answer all their questions." And it was shortly after, it was like a week or so after Pesach, and someone asked, why is it important that the seltzer water, which comes in these bottles in Chutz La'aretz, these seltzer bottles, why is it important that they be kosher Pesach? Isn't it just water? And the rabbi who was running the program turned to me and he said, "Well, our guest rabbi will be able to answer that." Well, of course, water can be not kosher for Pesach, or it can be treif 100%. After all, if you boil water in a kettle, in a pot, we boil water in a pot which was previously used for pork, so the water is going to be prohibited. And if you boil water in a pot which was previously used for spaghetti, so it's not going to be kosher Pesach. So of course bottled water needs a hechsher for Pesach. So that was that. Now you have a question about water. The water molecule has one oxygen and two hydrogens, and they're not oriented in a straight row. The oxygen in the middle and the two hydrogens on the side in a straight row, that they're organized in a triangle. The oxygen is here, and the two hydrogens are not symmetrical. If you think about it for a moment, you'll realize this means that the electron balance is not symmetrical in the water molecule. That's why it's called a polar molecule. You have more positive at one side of the molecule and more negative at the other side of the molecule. And this simple fact accounts for most of the chemical characteristics of the water molecule. Does that answer your question?
I liked it. I don't even know what I asked.
Not exactly what you were driving at. Okay, what?
No, but I like it. I wanted to know under what circumstances do we not make a shehakol on water, or I guess other things, but water was what really was on my mind.
It's towards the end of the sixth parak, right at the end of the sixth parak of Brachas. The Gemara speaks about chewing a piece of meat, swallowing the piece of meat. Oh, but it gets stuck. The piece of meat just doesn't go down, it gets stuck. And you want to grab a glass of water in order to wash the piece of meat down. Now, any ear, nose, throat doctor will be happy to tell you that the piece of meat is not really stuck in your throat. That doesn't really happen. The reason it feels that way is because the food going down, if it scrapes the sides of the throat, you continue to feel that scraping even though the food has gone down. After all, if the really would be stuck in your throat, which is possible, but extremely rare, you wouldn't be able to swallow saliva. You wouldn't be able to do anything. You would really be in trouble. Uh, in any event, the Gemara says that if you ate the umpza, this piece of meat, and now you're drinking water just to wash it down your throat, you're not drinking the water because you are thirsty. You are drinking it only because you want to wash the meat down your throat. This requires no bracha at all on the water.
Same
Therefore,
thing with vitamins. Vitamins, same category. Same.
therefore, if some people have no difficulty taking pills, capsules, tablets. Some people have no difficulty just sticking them in the mouth and swallowing them. Some people, like me, find it a lot easier to swallow the pill, capsule, a tablet, whatever it is, with some water. That's in concept exactly like what the Gemara says about the piece of meat. So, of course, if the reason you're drinking the water is not because you are thirsty, but just because you want to swallow the pill, the tablet, the capsule, no bracha. Now, it could be that you have two reasons why you are drinking the water. You might be thirsty, and you also want to swallow the tablet. Oh, if you are thirsty, and that's one of the reasons that you're swallowing the water, then it definitely requires a bracha. The time you're exempt from the bracha is when you're not thirsty and you're drinking it for other reasons.
Could
Okay?
one of those other reasons be like I have a headache and not thirsty, but or like I know I'll feel better or I should have fluids in me. I don't necessarily feel thirsty.
Yeah, yeah. Then you have the hana'ah, the benefit of having drunk the water. This requires a bracha. Unlike the pill case, the tablet case, or the meat case, where the only benefit you're getting is to help you swallow.
So you can't be deriving hana, and it has to be for a purpose other than thirst.
Exactly the correct technical word. The only hana from the water is a mechanical one, helping you swallow, which has nothing to do with eating and drinking. Let's take this idea a tiny step further. If if you have two things that you're swallowing approximately at the same time, one can be subsidiary to the other. I'll give you the extreme example, and then we'll see some more practical applications. The Gemara points out that if you are eating something which is very salty or something which is very harif, you immediately after you've swallowed it, you might want to put some bread in your mouth because your mouth is burning with the saltiness or the sharpness of the food. If so, the bread is tafel, subsidiary to the spicy food or the or the salty food, and no bracha is required on the bread. Surely not netilas yadayim, but no bracha at all, because the bracha that you already said on the herring covers the piece of bread which you're eating. Yeah, when we talk about preserved foods today, herring or any other preserved food, the amount of salt that we use nowadays is trivial amount of salt compared to the way they used to preserve foods. Uh, 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 well, uh, 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 if you drink Zexaneinziger, you can buy Zexaneinziger in any wine shop in Israel. Zexaneinzig in Yiddish means 96. You go into the wine shop and you ask for 96 96. 96. That means 96% pure alcohol. And you buy it in liter bottles or 750 milligram bottles, 750 samak bottles, cubic centimeters, milliliters. Drink it if you dare, but the normal use for it is to prepare cordials, to prepare different kinds of homemade liqueurs, where you would add pears and some sugar or something and make a liqueur, a homemade liqueur. But if you drink it as it is, it's really powerful stuff. Alcohol, what chemists call ethanol or ethyl alcohol, that molecule, the alcohol molecule, is highly hygroscopic. That means it draws moisture out of the atmosphere. It absorbs moisture from the atmosphere. If you have a glass just full of Zexaneinsigo, it's going to begin absorbing moisture from the atmosphere. It dilutes itself if there's any moisture in the atmosphere, and it'll start overflowing because as it absorbs moisture from the atmosphere and dissolves itself. This is why it's virtually impossible to have 100% pure alcohol. As soon as you open the container, it's going to begin diluting itself by absorbing moisture from the atmosphere. Zexaneinsic, 96% is the highest percentage, which practically can be bottled. Now, if you do drink some, the Gemara says that if you drink olive oil, pure olive oil, drinking pure olive oil is uziki mazikle, damages you, is harmful for you, and therefore no bracha is to be pronounced on drinking pure olive oil. Now, for a long time in my youth, ever so long ago, I found it difficult to understand this Gemara. What do you mean olive oil is harmful for you? What do you mean it's bad for you? Like anything, taken to excess I suppose is unhealthy, but reasonable amounts of olive oil are not unhealthy. On the contrary, modern medicine thinks that the kind of oil, the kind of molecule is even much better than other kinds of fats, other kinds of oils. Uh, I was once attending a competition where judges were deciding which is the best olive oil on the market, and this panel of judges was, they would taste some olive oil and spit it out, taste some more olive oil and spit it out, and they would decide who to give the prize to. And then the first thing I noticed was every time a judge would would not swallow actually, just taste the olive oil, spit it out, and cough. They're all coughing all the time. With every taste of olive oil, they're coughing. And I said, that's strange. When I got home, I tried it myself. And when you cough, it makes you cough. And I didn't know why exactly. I asked the food chemist, why is it that I cough every time I taste some pure olive oil? And he said, yeah, he told me the name of the molecule. I forget the name of it. It's a peppery molecule, which is in there, which stimulates coughing. That's surely what the Gemara meant when it says uziki masikle. If you drink pure olive oil, it makes you cough, and therefore no bracha is to be pronounced. Now, I must admit, wimp that I am, I've never actually drunk straight Zexaneinsiger, like ordinary scotch I enjoy immensely. Ordinary whiskey, either with an E at the end or with EY or just Y at the end. I immensely enjoy both. But Zexaneinsiger at 96% is a little bit too much for me. But I remember once in Purim celebration, a great Rosh Yeshiva poured for himself a small glass of Zexeneinziger and said, Uziki mazikle, and he drank it without a bracha and then started coughing. The so this would be another example of drinking something or eating something without a bracha. Well, for the sake of completeness, let's get the last example. Most pills, tablets, medicines, most of them don't taste good. And it's in no sense an act of eating when you swallow it. And therefore, of course, no bracha to be pronounced on a tablet, pill, or capsule. But some of them have good flavors added to it. Some of them naturally taste well. Now the question is, should you make a bracha on the ones which taste good? Some of them are designed, intended to actually slowly dissolve in the mouth, and some of them are designed even to be absorbed through the mucous membranes under the tongue, and some of them taste good. Should you make a bracha on those? Here the poskim are divided. The mainstream view is in accord with the thinking of Reb Shlomo Carlebach that the good taste which is added to the tablet is insignificant, is subordinate to the medicine itself. The reason you are taking the tablet is for the medicine which is in it. The good taste which they added to make it easier to hold in your mouth, that added taste is subordinate, is tafel to the medicine. The medicine requires no bracha, and therefore the added taste, which is tafel to the medicine, also requires no bracha. It doesn't matter whether the good taste is synthetic chemicals which are added or natural substances which are added to give it good taste. Doesn't matter. The good taste in this case is also batel, subordinate to the medicine, and therefore no bracha on that. Okay.
How about if it's a Ricola lozenge? People never know if they should say a bracha or not.
Ricola?
Yeah, like a throat lozenge, or if you have like a dry throat or a cough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ricola. I'm from Switzerland, so I grew up with Ricola. In Switzerland, we knew about it before it became popular all over the world. We used to buy it in these cans. In any event, Ricola, the standard Ricolas are mostly sugar. They have also the sugar-free versions, and even if you are taking it because you have a sore throat, the Ricola falls into the category of ma'achal bri'im. There's some things, a whole category of foods, which perfectly healthy, normal people eat, but sometimes you eat it because you are sick, have a sore throat or some problem, and you're taking it because you're sick. This is very different than the kinds of tablets, pills, which I was discussing before, which are only taken in order to relieve some discomfort, which are only taken because you feel bad. Ricola, well, people who are perfectly healthy enjoy the Ricola, even if they don't have a sore throat. This is ma'achal bri'im, something which healthy people swallow, and people who are sick, they have sore throat or whatever, will also do it for that. And since it's ma'achal bri'im, it does call for a bracha. Yes, one should say shakol niyeh b'dvaro before taking a Ricola.
Would like something like pure garlic or pure ginger that you're eating for the purposes of healing I'd say you're not even eating them for the purposes of healing.
These are not ma'achal briim.
Ah.
People do not. I know there's some people who do, but rov b'nei adam, most people, normal people,
I never claimed to be normal.
don't eat straight ginger or straight garlic. Okay, of course.
Can I ask
So
another
you
question
would
about the
just
shehakol?
sorry, I went to say you just wouldn't make a bracha. You just wouldn't eat. You would just eat it.
Correct. Okay, Hannah, what did you want to add?
Yeah.
You put yourself on mute.
Hannah?
Okay, another question about the shehakol, thanks.
Yes.
Okay, so when I finally get up and everything and I'm all ready to start my day and I've done my morning blessings, whatever. So I just have a cup of water because I think it's very healthy to have a cup of water. And I say shehakol. So right after that, if I'm gonna eat some kind of breakfast that's shehakol, would I say another bracha shehakol on the food? It doesn't matter if I had that intention in mind when I said it on my cup of water at the beginning.
Oh, excellent question. And here's the answer. When you make the initial shehakol on drinking the water, there are two possibilities. Possibility number one might be you are mindless, not thinking one way or another about eating other things afterwards. Or, in a slightly unusual case, you might have in mind, I'm drinking this one glass of water, period, and nothing else. If you had clearly in mind that you're drinking the water and nothing else, and then change your mind later on, then a new bracha is called for. If, on the other hand, when you made the bracha shehakol on the water, you weren't thinking one way or another about eating stuff later or drinking stuff later, then it's the stuff you take later is covered by the shehakol. Now, in drinking water, as you describe it in the morning, it's unusual that you would have clearly in mind that I'm having this water and nothing else. It's unusual. The more typical situation in which this would arise is people who are dieting. And they say, I'm going to have this one piece, this one biscuit. I'm going to eat this one biscuit, and that's all because I'm dieting. And then weakness of moral fiber leads them a few minutes later to say, oh, I think I'm going to have another one. Well, since they had clearly in mind when making the bracha on the first biscuit that that's it, period, no more after this, and then through weakness of moral fiber, they decide they want to swallow more fiber, a new bracha is required.
Is that because it's the done
Rav,
thing? Like in the morning, like, oh, I'm having my glass of water, the done, like I'm gonna then have something else, which is shehakol.
Da'at, what you have your mind on when you make the bracha is assumed to be the chazaka, the presumption is that you have in mind everything appropriate for that bracha, unless you clearly exclude other things.
So if you when you make the bracha, you don't say I'm not having anything else, but you think to yourself, this bracha is just for this cup of water, then you would make another bracha.
Correct.
And if it's like a bottle of water, a small bottle of water, and you start drinking it and then you leave the house in your car or something, would you make another bracha if it's a shinu makom or it's the same bottle? I mean, it's
Yeah. If at the time you made the bracha, well, let's first discuss not the case you mentioned. Let's first discuss the simpler case. Simpler case is a bracha which is made while you are underway. You are in the train, or you're walking along the street, or you're walking to catch the train. If you are underway when you make a bracha, then there's no shinui makom. There's no reason to make another bracha until you arrive at your destination. That's the simpler case. Now, if you are at home and make a bracha and then get underway, then you leave your house to walk somewhere, drive somewhere, take a train or a bus somewhere. Well, here, it all depends upon what you had in mind when you made the bracha. If you had nothing special in mind, you didn't think one way or another, then you should make an after bracha before you leave the house, and a new initial bracha when you start eating or drinking again. If, on the other hand, when you made the bracha in your house, you knew that you were going to be underway in the immediate future, then the bracha covers the entire trip. The more typical example of this would be what the Igros Moshe, what Reb Moshe Feinstein calls a tzikaro, a piece of candy, a sweet, a boiled sweet. Well, what in Commonwealth English is called a boiled sweet is called in North American English a candy, sukaria in Hebrew. You put it in your mouth while you're at home, and then you get underway. You go drive somewhere or walk somewhere or bicycle somewhere. Well, if you knew when you were making the bracha on the sukaria at home that you're going to be shortly underway, then if you take a second sukaria en route, it's covered. Okay. Any other issues that we should discuss today? Then let's talk about eggs. Let's see if I can. Every week I wonder whether I'm going to be able to do it correctly. What on earth is this? Voila. Eggs. But as I said, in order to get to the specific issue of eggs, we're going to have to see some background. The idea is that there are all kinds of situations where something is permissible b'diavad, after the fact. I'll give you the prime example in the Gemara, and then you'll understand how it works. Everyone knows that the ritual slaughtering of an animal, shchita, has to be done by a Jewish person who is over bar mitzvah. We can talk about bat mitzvah in a moment, but it has to be done by a Jewish man who is mumche, who knows the halachas and has the skill of how to do the shchita properly. As far as women doing ritual shchita, well, it all depends upon which team you belong to. According to Sephardic authorities, there's no objection to women doing the mitzvah of shchita. On the other hand, Ashkenaz authorities, beginning with the Tosafot, are not at all happy with women doing the mitzvah of shchita, and the reason is because in the early Middle Ages, there was a Jewish traveler who traveled through Europe. He called himself Eldad Hadani. He said his name was Eldad, and he said that he was a member of the tribe of Dan, one of the lost tribes of Israel, which resided in a distant place on the other side of the Sambation River. Sambation River is a very interesting river. It's a river which flowed calmly 6 days of the week, but on Shabbat it flowed violently with white water. The reason for this was believed by the tribe of Dan. They were on the other side of the Sambation River. The reason for this miracle was so that the Jews would be automatically protected from invasion by the river on Shabbat. They wouldn't have to take arms during the 6 days of the week. If an invading army came, the Jews would be able to take arms and protect themselves. In any event, this character Eldad traveled through Europe, what today is called France and Germany, telling stories about Jewish life on the other side of the Sambation River. about how they did mitzvahs. And he mentioned in passing that amongst the tribe of Dan, on the other side of the Sambatyon River, women do not perform the mitzvah of Shrita. Well, beginning in the early Middle Ages, Ashkenaz authorities refrained from giving their approval to female shochatim because of this report from this traveler who was reportedly, he said he was from the tribe of Dan. Well, historians doubt the veracity of the whole story, but the poskim continue in that vein. Why on earth is all this interesting? Because the Gemara says, Rov etzel shchita mumhim. The majority, more than 50% of shohatim know what they're doing and are fully competent. And therefore, if you have meat which was shechted by a shochet, after the fact, you can assume that the shochet was competent and did a proper job. However, that's only after the fact. Once, before the fact, before the act of shechita was performed, you have to ask the shochet, and you have to quiz him. You have to give him a little examination, make sure he knows the halachas. And only when you've verified that he is indeed, or if it's in the Sephardic community, she indeed is qualified to do shechita, then you can rely upon it. L'chatchila tzarich levarer. L'chatchila, you must establish the facts. B'diavad, once the deed has been done, it's too late to establish the facts. You can rely upon the fact that the majority of shochatim are competent. So we see that b'makom safek, where there's a doubt, if possible, you have to verify the facts. If you cannot verify the facts, then there's room to say the leniency of following the majority applies. Let's see the text in the Gemara, which I've put on the screen. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. They asked Rav Nachman the following question: Hamaskir bayit lachavero ba'abasa. Someone who owns an apartment and rents it out to a Jewish tenant on the 14th day of the 14th day of the month of Nisan, Erev Pesach. Okay, a Jewish landlord is renting his or her apartment to a Jewish tenant on Erev Pesach, the 14th day of the month of Nisan. Chezkato Boduk. Can the tenant who is moving in assume that the landlord performed the mitzvah of checking the house for chametz the night before, because that's when Jews are supposed to check the house for chametz? Or can the tenant not assume that the house was examined for chametz the previous night, and now the tenant is going to have to do it himself, or the tenant is going to have to do it herself? L'may nafkamina? Why do we care about this question? L'shayla, to ask the landlord. The point is, it's now after the fact. The examination of the apartment should have been done the previous night. Can the tenant moving in just assume that it was done? Or does the tenant moving in have to ask the landlord, did you do the mitzvah of checking your property for chametz last night? If so, I can move in without further ado. The lessay lahai lishmuye. But what if the landlord is not around? The landlord already traveled to keep Pesach by his family in another town. The landlord is not around. You can't ask him. whether or not he did the mitzvah of checking for chametz. La'atruche lahai mai, should we require the tenant to now do a thorough examination if the landlord is unavailable? That's the question which Rav Nachman was asked. The Ran, Spain, High Middle Ages, says, Kol hecha de'efshar levrurei milsa, whenever it is possible to clarify the facts, mivarinin, you have to clarify the facts. In a case like this, where the landlord is no longer available to ask whether or not he checked the house for chametz, well, now it's no longer possible to establish the facts, and you can rely on the presumption that, of course, a Torah-observant landlord would have checked his or her property the previous night, which is the mitzvah, the obligation falling upon the landlord. Of course, it was done properly. That's if you cannot verify the facts by asking, because the landlord's not around anymore. Lefichach. Therefore, the Rif writes, Lo samchinen arov mitzuyim etzol shchita bumchemhen. Therefore, we cannot rely upon the competence of the shochet just because the majority of shochatim are competent, unless the shochet is unavailable to be asked. If the shochet is unavailable and we cannot examine him by asking him questions, then we can assume that the majority are correct and he's also correct. Aval isul kaman. But if the shochet is before us in our presence, or if the landlord is in our presence, whatever the situation is, lo samchin chazak, we don't rely upon the presumption that all is well. We have to ask and check it out. You ask the landlord, did you check the house for chametz last night like you were supposed to? And he says, yes. Did you look in all the nookies and crannies? If he says yes, then we can rely upon that. If he's unavailable and cannot be asked, then the leniency of b'diavad applies. The Rosh, at the end of the Middle Ages, said, Hachared l'dvar Hashem, anyone who is Haredi, anyone who wants to do the halacha correctly, yivdok b'tzitzis kodem atifa, should check tzitzis before putting on the garment. One of the rules of the yeshiva is that we teachers are supposed to tell the truth. And as unpleasant as the truth may be, here goes. If you just find it intolerable, ignore it. Tzitzis is a mitzvah aseh shazman grama. It's a positive time-bound commandment, and therefore women are exempt from this mitzvah. The question therefore arises whether or not a woman who wishes to do this mitzvah is entitled to accept this mitzvah upon herself like any other mitzvah that women are exempt from. Tekiyas shofar, netilas lulav. There's a whole raft of mitzvot which are dependent upon time and women are exempt from. And I think everyone knows, or everyone should know, that of course it's commendable. Of course it's praiseworthy. Of course it's advisable for women who are exempt from these mitzvahs to accept them upon themselves and do the mitzvahs, even though they're exempt. The only machlokas amongst the poskim is whether it's correct for the woman to also make a bracha. Yeah, Sephardic poskim, Ashkenaz poskim, there are all kinds of opinions amongst the poskim about whether or not it's correct for women to make a bracha. But of course, it's commendable for women to make a bracha. What about tzitzis? Is tzitzis like any other mitzvah that women should be encouraged to fulfill the mitzvah, even though they are exempt from doing it? Or is there something different about tzitzis? Well, it all depends upon whether or not we're talking about the ladies of the Kotel or some other group. If it's the ladies of the Kotel, of course, they should be stoned and blocked from any part. Oh, that's just horrible. But as Rav Moshe Feinstein points out, the only significant problem, the only problem with women wearing tzitzis has to do with the prohibition of cross-dressing. Just as men should not dress as women, just as women should not, similarly, women should not dress as men. And therefore, since the ordinary styles of tzitzis, the ordinary styles of talis that we have in the market today constitute male garments, garments for men. After all, if you would take a talis, ordinary talis, which they sell in any talis store, and ask half a dozen people, do you think this belongs to a man, or do you think this belongs to a woman? Well, I'm pretty sure people would tend to think that a talis is a male garment and not a female garment in our society. And therefore, the Igros Moshe writes, women are blocked from wearing an ordinary talis because of the prohibition of cross-dressing. It follows, therefore, Reb Moshe Feinstein writes, a woman who wishes to accept this mitzvah upon herself must feminize the garment, put on lace trim, or color it pink, or do something which will feminize the style of the garment. And now now a man wouldn't be allowed to wear that style of talis, but for a woman, there's no objection at all. And according to Reb Moshe Feinstein and all the Ashkenaz, and many, but not all, Sephardic poskim, it would be correct to make a bracha on that as well. Now the Rosh says, anyone who is Haredi, that is anyone who wants to follow Midat Chasidut, anyone who wants to be Torah observant above and beyond the minimum requirements of halacha, should examine the tzitzis before making the bracha, before putting them on, to make sure that they're not torn, to make sure that the knots are correct. You should check before you do the mitzvah to make sure that you're doing the mitzvah correctly, and therefore the bracha that you pronounce will be a correct bracha. Now you'll notice that the obligation to check tzitzis is not a fundamental halachic requirement. It's just someone who wishes to be Haredi, Hasidic, pious, above and beyond the simple fundamental requirements of halacha should check the tzitzis first. Someone who puts on the tzitzis and makes the bracha without checking, that person is entirely kosher. After all, the tzitzis have a chazaka, a presumption of being kosher. The technical name for this chazaka, for this presumption, is chazaka me'ikara. I could probably even type that on chat if I could figure out how to do chat. Well, I don't know how to do chat at the moment. Oh, here it is. Chat. Voila. Chazaka me'ikara. Chazaka me'ikara is a presumption that works along the following principles. If we know for a fact that at some point in the past, something or someone was kosher and entirely correct, that presumption, that chazaka continues moment by moment, hour by hour, day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year, until something happens to raise doubts about that person or that object being kosher. We know for a fact that the mezuzah on the doorway was kosher at one point in the past when it was examined before being put up onto the doorpost. We know at one point in the past it was kosher. That chazakah, that presumption continues forever until something happens to make us think that it's possible. For example, if the mezuzah is outside, on the outside surface of the house, and it rains heavily, and the mezuzah is in a kind of case which is not waterproof, if something happens to make us think that the ongoing presumption of kashrus fails, then you have to check. But in the absence of some evidence that there's a problem, no examination of the mezuzah is required. And since we know at one point in the past that tzitzis were kosher at the time that they were tied and put onto the garment, that presumption continues forever until something happens in the real world, which indicates that there's a doubt. Here's a footnote about mezuzah. I know that in certain circles, it's very common to remove the mezuzah from the doorpost frequently to check it. But what it says in the Gemara is, in Tractate Yuma, what it says in the Gemara is, Rashai Adam, it's okay to remove the mezuzah from the wall twice, 2 times in every 7-year cycle. There's a 7-year cycle, the Shemitah, the seventh year is the Shemitah year. That's a cycle of 7 years. Within each cycle of 7 years, it's permissible to remove the mezuzah twice and examine it. This means that if something happens, painters came and slopped paint all over the doorpost, including the mezuzah, something happened to make you think that the mezuzah might be possible. Of course, it's correct to check the mezuzah. But if nothing happens to lead you to think that the mezuzah has been rendered invalid, you are permitted to remove the mezuzah twice in every 7-year cycle in order to check it. After all, every moment that you remove the mezuzah, every moment that there's no mezuzah on the doorpost, you are guilty of being mavatal mitzvahs aseh min Torah. You're guilty of failing to fulfill the Torah mitzvah of mezuzah. And well, Chazal permit us to cancel the mitzvah of mezuzah 2 times in a 7-year cycle. But if you've used up your 2 times in the beginning of the 7-year cycle, then for the remainder of the 7-year cycle, there's no permission to remove the mezuzah. You can space out the 2 examinations as you like, but you have a maximum of 2 examinations in the course of the 7-year cycle, unless something happens to make you think that the mezuzah is possible. Now, consider this idea one step further. If, when you remove the mezuzah for examination, you immediately replace it with a temporary mezuzah, now there's no reason why you should be permitted to remove the temporary mezuzah in order to put the other one back. The moment you remove the temporary mezuzah, you're again guilty of failing to fulfill the mitzvah. And therefore, even putting up a temporary mezuzah while the regular one is being checked is no basis for leniency. Bottom line, the mezuzah can be checked any number of times if there's evidence that it's invalid. In the absence of such evidence, the mezuzah can be checked only 2 times in the course of the 7-year cycle. All of this has to do with private mezuzot, which are owned by private persons, you or me, or by some partnership of private persons, if several people own the house together. Public mezuzot, which are not owned by any specific person or any partnership of people, but instead are owned by the whole public, like the mezuzot on the gateways of the city. If you go to Shar Yafo, for example, in the old city, there's a mezuzah at Shar Yafo. That's a public mezuzah. Public mezuzahs are checked not twice in every 7-year cycle, but rather in every yovel, in every 50-year cycle. The reason for this, according to Rashi and the other Rishonim, is, you don't know about this, but according to Rashi, people are lazy. And if Chazal would recommend checking more frequently, everyone would say, well, this is not my mezuzah. This is a public mezuzah. Let someone else do the job. If it were my mezuzah, of course, I would exercise myself to check it. But this is not mine. This belongs to the whole public. Plenty of other people out there who can check it. Let someone else do it. And therefore, Chazal wanted to minimize the checking of public mezuzahs, not twice in the 7-year cycle, but twice in the 50-year cycle. Okay, now we learned from the Rosh that that when there is a chazaka, a presumption of kashrus, well, it's okay to rely upon that presumption, but if you are Haredi, you wish to be pious above and beyond the requirements of halacha, then you will not rely upon the presumption of kashrus. Let's now see what the Aruch HaShulchan adds to the discussion. Aruch HaShulchan is talking about what in yeshiva is called, in yeshiva language, birya shlema, in Hebrew, briya shlema. Briya shlema is a whole creature. Whole creatures are never bottled in a mixture. The rule of 1/60th does not apply to whole creatures. For example, if you have one cow out of 100 cows, out of 1,000 cows, out of any number of cows, one cow out of 1,000 is treif. How is it possible to know whether or not a living cow is treif before it is slaughtered and the internal organs are examined? Well, in many ways that you can know that an animal is treif while it's still alive. For example, a cow which has suffered left displaced abomasum syndrome, that's doctor talk. Left displaced abomasum syndrome. That's doctor talk for the following problem. Cows, ruminants, we have one stomach. Cows have a far more complicated digestive system than we do. In the first stomach, the food is fermented. That's the beginning of the digestion process. Then the cow regurgitates the food, chews it again, swallows it again, and then the food goes into the second stomach, which is called the cava in Hebrew, the abomasum in Latin. And in the second stomach, enzyme reactions continue the digestion process in the second stomach. Now, as I've described it, you understand that fermentation is supposed to take place in the first stomach, not in the second stomach. The problem in modern agriculture, in modern farms, the cows are fed junk food. And they're not Bisley and Bamba, worse, cellulose. That's the scientific way of saying newspapers. Cows can digest cellulose. Humans cannot. The human body cannot digest cellulose, but cows can. And basically, that's all they need to eat is cellulose. They can digest cellulose and break down the cellulose molecule to get just about all the nutrition they need. Well, if they're fed cellulose, pure cellulose, like newsprint paper, which is very cheap, as opposed to eating grass in the free range. There's a lot of cellulose in grass, but you get a lot of other stuff, a lot of other nutrition in grass as well. If you feed the cows pure cellulose, they like it better if you add a little bit of molasses to it, then they eat it better. Not all of the fermentation is completed in the first stomach, and you continue to get fermentation in the second stomach where it's not supposed to happen. The reason that fermentation should be completed in the first stomach of the cow is because the products of fermentation produces carbon dioxide. That's why you get bubbles whenever you ferment grape juice to make wine. The fermentation produces carbon dioxide. That's a fact of nature. And the cow is capable of burping, releasing carbon dioxide from the stomach only in the first stomach. The second stomach does not have the capacity to burp, and therefore, if there's any fermentation in the second stomach, in the cava, in the abomasum, the carbon dioxide is going to get trapped in the second stomach, and the cow has no way to burp to release that. What happens is the abomasum, the cava, the second stomach, inflates like a basketball, which is not comfortable for the cow, and being uncomfortable for the cow is going to have reduced milk production, which the farmer will notice right away. The farmer will call the veterinarian because milk production goes down. The cow is suffering from something. And it's a very simple examination. One of the first things the veterinarian will check for is left displaced abomasum syndrome. As the stomach inflates like a basketball, it tends to rise in the abdomen of the cow. Over the second stomach is the cow's liver, and as the stomach rises in the abdomen, it will be displaced leftward by the liver, which is over the second stomach. And that's called left displaced abomasum syndrome. It's a fairly simple diagnosis. You can feel through the abdominal wall. It feels like there's a basketball in there. And the treatment, as far as the veterinarian is concerned, is simplicity itself. The treatment is you take an ordinary syringe, remove the plunger, and insert the needle into the abomasum. The gas will be released out of the back of the syringe because you removed the plunger. It doesn't smell very good, but within moments, the abomasum will contract to its normal size. The gas will be released. It will return to its normal position within moments. The cow will feel much better, and milk production will go up again to the normal quantities. Aka. The problem is that a puncture wound of the abomasum makes the animal trafe, like any other lesion in a major internal organ. And in modern farms, where the cows typically do not eat free-range grass, but instead are fed pure cellulose, abomasum, left displaced abomasum is fairly common, around 15% of milking cows suffer from this problem. Now, even if you have a single cow, which is treif, among 1,000 other cows, the milk produced by the treif cow is treif. If a milking cow produces milk, and then the animal is slaughtered, and the internal organs are examined, and the animal is found to be treif. If you still know where that milk is, or if you still know where the cheese is that was made from that milk or that cheese is also treif, also prohibited. Now, a bria shlema, or as I say in yeshivas, a beria shlema, a whole cow, even mixed with 1,000 other cows in the herd, all of the cows are prohibited if you don't know which one is the treif one. The rule of 1/60th does not apply to whole creatures. As far as the milk is concerned, the rule of 1/60th does apply. Indeed, the rule of majority would apply in the case of milk. The milk is going to be okay because the amount of treif milk, which is mixed in with the kosher, is surely insignificant. But a whole creature is not bottle. And therefore, it's possible to know whether or not there is blood in the egg with an external examination before you crack the egg open, namely by candling the egg. Put a light source on the other side of the egg. They used to use candles. So you can candle the egg and determine whether or not there's a blood spot in there. Even though that's possible, if you have one egg, assume the worst. You have one egg with a blood spot in it mixed with hundreds of other eggs. Yesh torach rav livdok kulam. There'd be a lot of effort involved to candle each individual egg. That's torach rav. That's a lot of effort required. Ihava amrinin dehi b'tela. Eno tzarich litroach bazeh. But where there is a lot of effort involved, even though we're talking about a whole egg, which has the status of being a bria shlema, and therefore should never be bottled, even in 1,000, if there's a lot of effort involved in checking, achshav, she'ena betela muchrach hu sheyesru kol habeitzim l'vdok ad sheyim mitzohen. Well, since a lot of torach is involved, we do not require examination. Okay? What have we learned up to this point? Wherever there's a suffix and it's possible to establish the facts, that's what you have to do. And now the Aruch HaShulchan is introducing the idea, but if establishing the facts is going to require a great effort, then you don't have to expend great effort. You can rely upon the presumption or upon the majority of all being correct. I'm going to pause at this point, and next week we'll see how this applies specifically to the eggs that we eat and how this idea gets applied in many other situations. We'll pause then, and if you have any questions, now is the time to ask them. And we'll continue with
Can we still check eggs? Like, can we use like a flashlight or something and you can see a blood spot?
Sure, but it's a lot easier to just crack open the egg and look at it.
Yeah, I mean, in
Well,
Israel,
there's
you
the-
almost
there's the-
never, I mean, if you find, in Israel, you don't usually find blood spots, but if you're Chutz La'aretz, sometimes you have a half of a dozen that are, have blood spots, you just start throwing them away.
Yeah, the only reason to candle it is if you're not going to open it anyway. It's much easier to just open and look. But your precise question, I promise we're going to talk about next week, because those are in the upcoming sources. Okay, so consider this a cliffhanger.
It seemed like the example you gave of the cow, that seemed like a lot of tircha also. And yet there was a more strict, the handling of it is more strict.
There's no suffix if we know that one of the cows is treif. There's no suffix here. We know that it's true. Okay.
Oh, well, you talk about, I don't know if you want to enter now, but I've heard before that it's okay to make a hard-boiled egg
Oh, next
without
week.
checking.
Exactly. This is going to be the center of our discussion next week.
I see you use the word torcha or torach rav. Torcha?
In Aramaic, tircha. In Hebrew, torah.
Torach rav. Is that the same term we'd apply to the public mezuzah, only needing one of every 50 years? Twice every 50 years?
Yeah. Of course, one should want to know the criterion, how to determine whether or not something, halachically speaking, is considered torah, a great effort. The answer to this question, according to the Rishonim, is very simple to answer. Things that people complain about doing are Torah. That's considered a great effort. Things that people do without complaining is considered not to be Torah, not to be a great effort. If I ask my grandchild, can you please take out the garbage? And he says, do I have to do it now? Oh, so that is Torah. That is great effort. But things that people do without complaining, that's considered to be not great effort.
We have a different bar than the Rishonim, but
Of course, what in one society is considered great effort, in another is that the people used to live very differently than we live today. We're very spoiled.
to say the least.
Okay. Tov, that's it for today. I wish you a good week and a safe week and a good Shabbos, and look
Amen.
forward to seeing you all again next week. Okay.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat.
Thank you,
Shabbat
Rav Fink. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.